from the heart. You've got subtitles as well. I always recommend that you watch once without subtitles and then once again with subtitles to see how much you manage to understand. So what is a prized possession? To English with Lucy. The other day on my Instagram, I asked, what sort of video would you like to see next? I asked on this photo here. And by far the most popular comment was, tell us about your trip to Barcelona. Unfortunately, I didn't film much or take so many photos, so I can't do that. The second most popular was phrasal verbs, and the third most popular was travel vocabulary. I thought I would take travel and phrasal verbs, fuse them together, and talk to you about travel-related phrasal verbs. So let's get started.
i.e. people who have English as a mother tongue, and also non-native speakers, people who are learning English as a second or as an additional language. It might be your third language. I know some of you are completely crazy and are on your seventh language. Comment down below and tell me how many languages you speak. I'm going to talk to you about words that are hard to pronounce. There will be 20 words in total, and it's going to be a bit of a tongue twister even for me. I love doing these pronunciation videos. I've done a couple before. I did one on commonly mispronounced words by English with Lucy Business English course. Firstly, let me introduce myself. My name is Lucy Bella Earle and I am a native qualified English teacher. I'm also a graduate of Westminster Business School where I achieved a first-class degree in marketing communications. In January 2016, I started the English with Lucy YouTube channel, where I've helped tens of millions of students improve their English skills. Whether you like it or not, English is the global language of business, and many multinational companies use English as the common corporate language. This means that if you want to work in a top company, very British. I'm sure it's used in American English, but it's something we say a lot. Couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Sometimes we get rid of that first I. Couldn't agree with you more. Or number 37, very informal. Tell me about it. Tell me about it. Totally agree. It's funny because we're not asking you to tell us about anything. But it's a common way of saying, yes, I feel the same way. Now, naturally, we need some phrases for disagreeing with people. And we usually affordable. You can now start the Business English course and speak better English in relevant business situations from only €79 per month. And you can get 3 free group classes or 1 free private class in order to try it out. I have tried Lingoda myself and I was blown away by how easy, convenient and affordable it is. You can get €25 off your first month at Lingoda by clicking on the link in the description box and using my code LUCY12. Please note that if you want to try the free classes, this code can't be used. Right, let's get on with the lesson. Firstly, let's discuss
times like that if it's important. If English isn't your first language, I'd say you probably need to practice it 6 times for it to feel okay on the day.
Yeah, because when you have something practiced, it kind of just comes out more easily. So I really agree with that one. What about tip number 2?
Tip number 2 is that you've got to get the body relaxed and prepared. So it's what I call getting the butterflies.
You got me moving there. Okay.
Breathing and grounding. The butterflies have to fly in formation. So you know in English we say that you get butterflies in your stomach.
Yes, that's a great idiom. If we're nervous and you feel that
affairs, search for it in English and start listening to it. My next point is multitask. Unlike reading or watching TV, listening is something that you can do whilst you do something else. So once you've found your ideal resource, start to build a sort of pack of resources on your smartphone or your computer that you can take with you. So if you have a long car journey, on the way to work, on public transport, whilst you're doing something else like cooking, something you don't have to concentrate on, listen to something in English. Now that
do is learn loads of English, i.e. 90 classes with real native qualified teachers. What's not to like? And you know what? Even if you don't complete it, at the very least, you've done 90 days of English. If you're interested and you feel that you are dedicated enough to do the language marathon properly, all you have to do is click on the link in the description box and use the code RUN5. This will discount your €5 entry fee. All you will pay is 50 cents, and that's just to make sure they have your credit card details. Good luck to everyone taking part. I think you've done an amazing thing. Hello everyone, and welcome back to English with Lucy. Today I am going to talk to you about 7 words that learners of English commonly use incorrectly. They commonly misuse these words. This video will help you find out if you are also making mistakes with these words, and I'll show you how to use them correctly, and I'll also show you what you were trying to say by misusing these words. Before we get started, I would just like to thank the sponsor of today's video. It is Skillshare. And if you haven't heard of them before, they're here to improve your English. What better way than doing a little bit every single day and then getting all your money back at the end? Keep watching. Right, so those that follow this channel will know that I work with Lingoda very closely and very frequently. And I regard them as one of the very few trusted companies that I'm happy to work with on a regular basis. I genuinely really like their platform and services, and that's why I'm happy to promote it to my viewers and subscribers. Now, quickly, what Lingoda is, it's an online language academy. They only use real qualified native teachers. You can learn English, bar or restaurant where English speakers tend to go. Maybe try going there with the intention of just overhearing other people's conversations. If they say something you don't understand, search it on your phone, just drink in the atmosphere, and you'll just take in a lot of vocabulary you wouldn't normally come across. And there's no pressure on you. Well, the only pressure is that you don't get caught, because you could look a little bit weird, but you're not doing any harm. Some people in England like to call it people watching, and it's a really popular pastime. You just sit in a cafe, normally at the window, and watch the world go by. But in English, something weird might happen after a while. You might automatically start thinking in English, and you might even start dreaming in English. They say that you are really becoming fluent if you start dreaming in a second language. And a very weird thing can happen. You can start dreaming about your friends and family that don't speak your second language, speaking in your second language. I've had my parents telling me to do stuff in Spanish, and I've just woken up very confused. Another point, still related to the ways of involving English in your everyday life so that you can practice. Take a handful or maybe just a couple of these ideas, put them into practice, and watch your language skills transform in front of your eyes. These ideas work for any language, so it doesn't just have to be English. Let's get started with the lesson. Number 1, my first idea is try following chefs or recipes in the language that you're trying to learn. Now, when you learn a new language, it's really good to learn about their culture. It will help you a lot, and you can learn really confident after an English lesson, but when you go out and you speak to a native, you might not be able to communicate as much as you thought before. Manage that expectation. But something that you can do to understand more in real life is lead that conversation. You ask the questions, ask them to slow down, ask them to speak more clearly, and ask them to repeat things. That's one thing that you can do. But in order to understand 70% of a real life conversation, you need to make sure that you're understanding 80% in the classroom. Right guys, that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for joining me here in my new... In American English, they say to seek new pastures, to seek new pastures. This means to start to want to travel or to do something different with your life. For example, after 14 years of schooling, I got itchy feet and started to plan my move to Spain. Number 19. In British English, we say to go pear-shaped. To go pear-shaped. In American English, they say to go south. To go south. This means to go wrong or to go badly. For example, the party was great, but after they handed out comedy that uses the complexities of British English to the fullest extent, see, they'd use things like that, and I almost don't know what I'm saying, so you maybe won't either. You want to start with easier things and work your way up to more difficult things. There is no point starting at the top unless you're a genius. So I'm going to give you this sort of order of resources that you should go for, and you can kind of see where you're at, see what you understand, and then, you know, maybe move up to the next one. So what kind of things should you listen to if you don't know any English? Well, when you're speaking in English, hide those nerves. Body language is key. Pretend that you know what you're talking about. Don't be arrogant, but show that you are not afraid and people will trust you, listen to you. Pretend that you're confident. Okay, number 4, and this is something that I really, really believe in, and this is talk to yourself. I always talk to myself in the language that I'm learning, and it really serves as preparation for when you're in situations in which you will need to in the English dictionary. Do you know which word it is? The word is very. Oh my god. Very is such a boring word. Every time I hear it, I yawn. Why say very good if you can say excellent, fantastic, amazing, incredible? Why say very bad if you can say dreadful, appalling, hideous, revolting? Stop using the word very and start incorporating more advanced adjectives into your everyday speech and writing. When you're speaking, try and be conscious of every time that you use the word very and form my pronunciation, and you can do the same with English. You should also analyse the voice quality. How much voice do we allow to escape through our throats? Compare it to yours as well. If you are serious about improving your pronunciation and your spoken English, then you do need to be very critical about what you are speaking at present and work towards correcting it. Tip number 2 is to combine reading and listening, thus improving your pronunciation. Perhaps you will know
really helpful because there's not one definitive way of speaking English. There are lots of variations, regional variations, variations by country. I mean, English spoken in New Zealand is very different to English spoken in America, for example. So you need to be able to recognize more or less everything and diversify your English. Focusing on that word variety again, I want to talk to you about resources. For my next point, I want you to ask yourself a question. I want you to answer it to yourself honestly. How much time do you actually dedicate to practicing and improving your listening skill?
help you to master spoken English. If you apply these tips to your everyday life, you will really notice a difference and you will become more confident and more comfortable speaking English. My first tip is to get to know the parts of your body that you use whilst speaking English. This might sound a little odd, but trust me on this one. If you don't understand which parts of your face, tongue and throat are used when speaking English, then how will you ever be able? It seems like the absolute best way to learn English, aside from moving to England and just immersing yourself in the culture, which is not that easy. So they did the language marathon before, and because it was so successful and there were so many happy people, they've decided to run it again. You can get a €567 language course, and on the condition that you do complete every single class, you get all of your money back. all of it. There's also a half marathon option, which I will discuss with you, which involves getting half of your money back as well if you don't feel have a hard time guessing that I'm English, because I've worked hard to lose the majority of the pronunciation errors that speakers of English usually make in Spanish. Right guys, that's it for today's lesson. Don't forget to comment down below with which of these situations have happened to you, and if you can add any more to the list, that would be fantastic. Also, don't forget to check out Skillshare. Remember that the first 500 people that click on the link in the description box will get their first 2 months free. And you can connect with me on all of my social media. I've got my Facebook, I've got my Instagram, and I've got my Twitter.
You can't directly translate it into English. We're not going to understand you, or we're going to have a tough time understanding you. Yeah. That's a big one. Also, they really struggle with phrasal verbs.
And I think the confusing thing in English is some phrasal verbs have multiple meanings as well. So
yes. And some can be separable, others aren't. Yeah, it's really difficult. Yeah, really difficult.
And so, what about your teaching experience? How did you get into teaching?
Well, it was by accident.
Really?
But it was the best accident I ever had. I was working in
But singing along with English songs is a fantastic way of practicing your speaking, and it will help you become more fluent. Tip number 4 could be slightly controversial, but I think it's a really good tip, and I always used to tell my students to do it in London. So lots of students struggle to meet and find native speakers to practice with. They often also have a hard time actually talking to natives because they're so nervous, or they take a little bit longer to understand what they say. I would say that a great step to proceed talking with natives is eavesdropping on natives. To eavesdrop and familiarise yourself with English conversations. Let me know if you've ever done this, and let me know if you've ever got caught. Number 5 is, this is a really good tip. This tip will really, really help you if you're nervous about speaking English with natives or non-natives. Practice conversations through WhatsApp audio notes. On WhatsApp and on most messaging services, there is a function where you can record your voice and send it. I encourage my students to talk amongst themselves and to talk with natives through this feature. It's so much more convenient than a phone. That's only in spoken English, we wouldn't write that. 36, this is very British. I'm sure it's used in American English, but it's something we say a lot. Couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Sometimes we get rid of that first I. Couldn't agree with you more. Or number 37, very informal. Tell me about it. Tell me about it. Totally agree. It's funny because we're not asking you to tell us about anything. But it's a common way of saying, yes, I feel the same way. Now,
okay, well that is it for my lesson on how to apologise in English. If you ever come to England, make sure that you've got these words mastered and all of the correct body language, and let's hope that you guys never have to say sorry to me. Make sure you connect with me on all of my social media. I will see you for another lesson very, very soon. Mwah!
German, Spanish and Business English at any level, and they run a very special event called the Lingoda Language Marathon. So what is it? Well, you study every day, unless you take the half marathon where you study slightly less, and if you complete the marathon you get a 100% refund on your classes, or a 50% refund if you do the half marathon. This marathon starts on the 27th of May and finishes on the 24th of August. You have to participate in an agreed amount of classes each month in order to succeed. That's 30 classes a month for the full marathon and 15 classes Spanish, German, English, and business English 24 hours a day, 7 days a week from anywhere in the world as long as you have a stable internet connection. You learn with native qualified teachers in both group and private classes. When you complete enough courses, you receive a CEFR certificate ranging from A1, which is beginner, to C2, which is advanced. You follow a structured curriculum and can choose from over 1,000 classes, which means you can tailor what you learn to your profession and interests. Lingoda have given me a... They want their English qualifications to then be able to get a better job. And obviously they'll have to do a job interview. So that's something I get asked about quite a lot. Do you have any tips for those people?
Yes, and I spend quite a lot of time with people thinking about job interviews because they're horrible, aren't they?
They're the worst.
Just they're evil. So there are tips and tricks to help you get over that feeling of being watched. Because I think the first thing to say is you are, in a job interview, you really are being observed.
Absolutely.
There's no getting away. Which is, it's quite a hideous feeling. So you firstly just have to get yourself nice and calm and centered.
I get messages on Instagram and comments on YouTube saying, whenever I read anything in English, I do it in your voice, Lucy. And at first I thought, how strange. And then I thought, oh, that's what I do to Stephen Fry. So yeah, pick a voice of somebody that you really, really like. And try using their voice in your head next time you read something. If you're reading to practice your English, let me know which person you choose in the comments, because I think it will be quite funny to see who everyone chooses. Now, the next tip is for people who just really aren't satisfied. Friends. Yeah, you can speak English with people you trust. He also says to imagine yourself in different daily situations in which you have to speak English. Again, it's that talking to yourself technique that I mentioned before. Paco says the more he speaks with natives, the more confident he feels. And yes, it's the immersion again. Roy says get a girlfriend who's a native speaker. Yes, if you can manage that, that's fantastic, but make sure you're with her for the right reasons. Hector says speak slowly at first and then build up. Absolutely. I completely agree with Hector. Okay guys, that is it for today's class. I really hope that I've got an American English pronunciation one as well, so don't miss out. Right, let's get started with the video. So the first name that I'd like to talk about is actually a Hispanic name, and it is Joaquin. Joaquin, like the Joaquin Dead. So in Spanish it should be Joaquin, but speakers of English generally tend to pronounce it as Joaquin. Joaquin. So Joaquin Phoenix, for example. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't roll off the tongue. Number 2, now some of you are going to laugh at this one because you will know how to pronounce it, but I honestly...
The things that when we're speaking English, and it's something I think you talk about as well, that helps us as listeners is emphasis.
Okay.
And the iambic, English has what's called really an iambic pentameter, which is like Hamlet.
Yeah.
If you think of to be or not to be, that is the question. There's a kind of de-dum, 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 de-dum.
Yes. Yeah.
And lots of languages, as you know, Spanish doesn't have that. It's a different kind of rhythm. So when you're speaking on the phone, if you really hit the nouns and the verbs, in particular, the meaning words, you give them a little bit of punch. You can actually punch the word.
Myself a lot, because when I started the English with Lucy YouTube channel, I had no idea how to work a camera. A funny story is that my dad lent me a small amount of money to buy a camera and a tripod. So I bought them both secondhand, and when they arrived, they didn't work. So I phoned up the company and I said, look, you've sent me the camera, you've sent me the tripod, but it's not filming anything. And they told me that I hadn't bought a lens. But I went from not knowing anything about cameras, photography, video production, anything, to being
English pronunciation and English speaking is so difficult for learners. I have found a really good method that has helped so many of my students. Take a book that you have already read in English, or a book that you would like to read in English. I have got a fair few recommendations in the description box down below. And read that book again, but here's the important part, whilst listening to the audiobook version on Audible. If you listen to a word, as you read it, your brain will start making connections. Shy and start speaking English confidently. My little brother and I were reading comments on one of my videos the other day, and he pointed out one which really made me feel sad. Someone said, "I can't speak English because I am a shy person." And I don't know if it was the wording of it, but it really broke our hearts. The fact that somebody doesn't think they can learn a language because they are a shy person made me feel really sad, so I decided to make this video to help motivate you all, especially you shy people. I receive a lot of messages about confidence.
We'll see you again for another English lesson very soon. Mwah! Ready? Oh, okay. So, okay. Oh my god, it's you again. Oh my god, it's you! Since you're in London, I'd love to show you my area. Okay, do that again. Okay. Yeah, perfect. When you said, I said Emma, and you're like, I was like, what to the
which confuses me so much because the channel name is English with Lucy. It is right there. I say it for you and I write it for you. So really, it's just careless. But that being said, don't forget to connect with me on all of my social media. I've got my Facebook, my Instagram and my Twitter, and I will see you soon for another lesson. Mwah. People are studying English. They're trying to get exams to then be able to get a job. So they want their English qualifications to then be able to get a better job. And obviously they'll have to do a job interview. So that's something I get asked about quite a lot. Do you have any tips for those people?
Yes, and I spend quite a lot of time with people thinking about job interviews because they're horrible, aren't they?
They're the worst.
Just they're evil. So there are tips and tricks to help you get over that feeling of being watched. Because I think the first thing to say is you are, you know, in a job interview, you really are being observed.
Absolutely.
There's no getting away.
For those who are trying to learn English, there are so many words in the English language that are like this. There are make and do, miss and lose, earn and win. So many words where we have 2 or 3 or 4 words for this, but in other languages there's just 1 word. But I'm going to clarify exactly when you should use miss, when you should use lose, and when you can use to be missing as well. So I'm going to start by going through all of the situations in which you should use miss, and then I'm going to give you some extra little collocations and miscellaneous phrases as well.
But I would advise against using them in written English. It's something that we tend to use more speaking. Now remember that your subject has to agree with the verb. Wanna, I wanna, he or she wants to. Then remember to use the verb to be with gonna. And the pronunciation, she's gonna, he's gonna, it's gonna. Okay, that's everything. I hope to see you very soon for another lesson. Don't forget to connect with me on all of my social media, which is here.
It does make the English language quite complex because we don't actually say what we mean, but don't shoot the messenger. I'm just trying to help out. An example, you behaved inappropriately at the staff party, to say the least. And number 12, this one is used in the middle of a criticising sentence. And this one actually is quite different to the previous one. This one is used to make a statement or criticism appear less severe or offensive. It is, shall we say? Shall we say? And translate them into English because some of them are so funny. I mean, a sandwich short of a picnic. That particularly tickles me. Don't forget to check out audible.com. The link is in the description box, and you can connect with me on all of my social media. I've got my Facebook, I've got my Instagram, and I've got my Twitter. And I will see you soon for another lesson. Mwah! Today, it is very hot, very, very hot. I'm dying. Oh my God. We were in a lovely posh hotel, and I called up Rune, why am I saying? British English, we would say to flog a dead horse. To flog a dead horse. In American English, they would say to beat a dead horse. To beat a dead horse. This simply means to waste energy on something that has no chance of succeeding. For example, you're flogging a dead horse by trying to make my dad eat trifle. He's not going to do it. You're not going to succeed. Number 8. Now, I will admit that sometimes I use the American version, and you do have to bear that in mind with these idioms, because in Britain we consume so many. We have a brilliant saying in English called, when there's a will, there's a way. So when you intend to do something, there's a way of doing it. And if you want to find a way of immersing yourself into English or the language that you're learning, there is a way. Now I want to read a few of the suggestions from my students on Instagram. One that I really like, and not all of you are going to like this. This is from Illich from Venezuela. And he says, hello, I believe that drinking is the way to get more confidence. I went to Brighton. 3. Tip number 3 is sing along to English songs. Now, this tip is especially useful if you want to practice an American accent. The reason for this is that many British singers actually sing with a slight American accent. So sometimes songs sung by British singers aren't actually a true representation of their own accent. If you listen to, I don't know, One Direction or a British boy band, they'll often sing with an American accent. Even Ed Sheeran does it sometimes. Someone who does, but then in English it's a different word order. It's really quite interesting, so try that one out. Now the next one, learn a skill. Now we always talk about the 4 English skills, don't we? Listening, reading, speaking, writing. That's what we're always examined on in our tests at school. But I'm not talking about practicing one of these skills in English. I'm talking about another skill, like a hobby. Take a hobby and learn it in English. I personally find it very, very boring to sit down with a book and learn and dedicate myself. I'm much more likely to a little bit. In English, especially in British English, we have the habit, a huge habit of reducing everything, trying to make things seem not quite as important or profound as they actually are. For example, if you gave me the most disgusting cup of tea ever, I would say, oh, well, it's not the worst tea I've ever had, or, oh, yes, I think I could get used to it. It's a real issue, and we often use this technique whilst delivering criticism. But if you decide that you actually do want the receiver of the criticism to
teachers of all the languages really, but especially for English in this channel. And if you click on the link in the description box, you will earn 100 free italki credits as soon as you make your first purchase. So that's basically a buy one get one free on the lessons, so make sure you check that out. Okay, back to the class. Okay, so how to apologise in English, part 1 of this video. Well, the most basic way is sorry. So sorry is good if you're in a hurry. If you bump into someone on the street or if you step on someone's shoe, you can just say, oh, sorry, sorry. So if you want to say, Lucy, I want to learn British English, and to do that, I'm only going to listen to British speakers. But in my opinion, that's not the right thing to do. You are going to meet people from all over the world with all different accents, and you're going to need to understand them. You don't want to just be able to understand British people. So if you're not doing it already, I want you to listen to as many accents as possible. And when you're doing that, I want you to think about the different sounds that each accent makes. I made a video with the lovely Anna from English Like a Native about the differences.
I've had so many English with Lucy students studying at Lingoda, and I've got such great feedback because it's perfect for busy people. You can schedule in classes 24/7. There are teachers all over the world. There are always group and private classes available. I've tried out some of their classes myself and they are really high quality. You've got fantastically prepared activities with the real native qualified teacher, very small group sizes, private lessons as well. You pay on a monthly basis. There are various different tiers, different levels, and they have given me a special offer to give to you. Audiobook. And I've got some recommendations in there for audiobooks read with a British English accent and also an American accent as well, so you can choose whichever is more relevant for you. That being said, let's get started with the video. Now the first one is this one. Oh, what a gorgeous brand. I've always wanted one of their fancy belts. I've never been able to justify one though. This one, I used to pronounce it Hermes, but upon doing my research, I found out that it should be pronounced Hermes, Hermes, Hermes. And that's because I'm going to teach you how you can sell yourself in English on your CV, in your cover letter, and in your interviews. In your CV, your cover letter, your telephone interviews, and your job interviews, you are selling yourself. Language plays a huge part in this. In this lesson, I'm going to teach you about the weak words you should avoid saying and the powerful words you should use instead. To start, let's talk about 25 words you should use to sell yourself. Used to listening to fast English conversations. It's a really great technique, but it does need a little bit of dedication. Exercise number 3 is connected speech. I'm going to say this sentence quite a few times. I think I'm going to say it 4 times. I recommend that on the first time you just write down what you hear. If it's letters, maybe it's just a load of letters that you hear or random words. Then, over the next couple of times that you hear it, try and make it out into a full sentence. What you're doing is training your brain to adapt. And there are loads of English courses and things that you might be interested in. And most importantly, let me know how it goes. Right, let's get started with the lesson. So, how do you know when you are fluent in another language? Well, I'm going to talk to you about 12 situations, and if these situations have happened to you, it means that you are on your way to becoming fluent. If all of these situations have happened to you, congratulations, you're fluent. So I would love you to comment down below with how many of these situations have happened to you and which ones, and also if you can think of any other
in English, the 10th of June 1994, and in American, June 10th, 1994. Now, did you hear me when I read out the British version? It's written 10th June 1994, but I said the 10th of June 1994. So, you don't need to write the and of, but you do need to say it. If you say, my birthday is 10th June 1994. It sounds a bit weird. It sounds a bit...
Speaker of English have never once felt annoyed or frustrated with somebody asking me to repeat something if I know that they have been listening and trying to understand me. If, it's my boyfriend who obviously has zoned out, who wasn't listening to what I was saying and then says, "What? Sorry, can you say that again?" Yes. That is annoying. But if someone's obviously not understood me, I don't mind. In fact, I'm glad that they want to understand what I'm saying and that they care enough about what I'm saying that they're asking me to repeat it. So there are 2 things that I want you to start getting confident at saying. Because I made a video about how to say dates in English, and a lot of people were excited thinking that I was going to teach them about dating, but actually I was speaking about numerical dates. So how can you be more confident whilst meeting someone maybe for the first time or even the second time on a date?
So I asked a friend of mine who is brilliant at dating, and I said, what is it that you do? And she said, well, actually it's something that you taught me. Mm-hmm. And I was surprised by that, and she said, you taught me years ago, and this is another acting tip, that when you meet someone and you're on a date, what you have to do is think, this is a real act in formation. So you know in English we say that you get butterflies in your stomach.
Yes, that's a great idiom. If we're nervous and you feel that funny feeling in your tummy, we call it having butterflies. So you're saying that we need to get our butterflies in formation.
Like the red arrows, like the planes that fly in formation.
So you need to take hold of those butterflies and channel them into something positive.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because the idea is, I mean, is it for performers as well, for, you know, anybody who's on stage, that adrenaline is actually a really good thing.
Because adrenaline is a feeling that I hate. Those nerves of the special discount for English with Lucy viewers. Don't forget to connect with me on all of my social media. I've got my Facebook, I've got my Instagram, and I've got my Twitter. And I will see you soon for another lesson. Mwah!
Today I want to talk to you about how you can improve your English listening skills. So I've got some tips that I'm going to give you. If you do follow all of my English listening tips, then you should be able to start to understand native speakers more easily and more effectively. We've got a lot to cover in the lesson, so let's get started. There's a word that I'm going to be using a lot in this lesson, and it is variety. I want you to use a wide range of resources and listen to a wide range
there is, but you're here to learn English, so I imagine that's what you want to learn. And italki has thousands of native teachers at incredible prices, and they can help you become more fluent more quickly. You can book yourself in for a conversation lesson or a planned lesson any time of the day with native teachers, non-native teachers, whatever you want. And italki have very kindly given me an offer to give to you, which is $10 worth of italki credits when you make your first $10 purchase. So it's like a buy one, get one free on lessons. All you have to do is click on the link. But I understand that speaking English, speaking a second language, can be very nerve-wracking. It's just like dating, in my opinion. And you do want to have these things prepared. Tip number 5 is focus on pronunciation over grammar. Now, there will be some teachers out there watching this and thinking, oh my God, what? This is honestly my opinion. I think that bad grammar habits are much easier to correct than bad pronunciation habits. I would say that it's much I don't like making English too theoretical, but I think it's important that you recognise these terms. I'm going to do a brief summary of each topic and then some examples for you to practice with, and then you can apply them to your daily speaking practice. Let's go! The first one, catenation, also referred to as linking. This is when a consonant sound at the end of one word is carried over to connect with the vowel sound at the beginning of the next word. In simple terms, an apple, an apple. Catenation is They are commonly used with up. English is a very diverse and complicated language, so yes, you might hear someone say, can you scrub out those pans? But I wouldn't recommend it because it's not commonly used. Right, let's move on to the next part of the lesson. I'm going to give you some vocabulary words and phrases, some are quite idiomatic, that describe cleanliness. Words and phrases that you can use to talk about things that are very clean. A couple of words first. The first one is spotless. Spotless. She cleaned the kitchen. Look around, think, what don't I know in English? And if you see something, for example, lamppost, curtain, then note it down and make a point of, at the end of the day, finding out what that word is in English. Number 7, this tip is very helpful because I know a lot of you just want to learn one specific accent. Well, this tip is speak with a variety of native speakers who all have different accents. It's so tempting to just focus on one accent, but market, they are better than the English gherkins. Anyway, I digress. The lid is really, really tight, and I always go and ask a man in the house to open it, and they're trying, and then I think, let me have a crack at it, let me attempt, it's my turn, and I do it, and sometimes I manage it, but that's to have a crack at something. It is to try and do something, or to have a turn at trying to do something. So you could use it in a situation like, would you mind taking my picture? It's a common tourist situation, and you could say, I'll have a crack at it. Or, ugh, in British English as well, or In American English, they are also really inclined to say ew, ew, sometimes followed by gross. And because we have a lot of American movies and TV shows in the UK, now our children are starting to say ew, gross and gross. In fact, I think I remember saying it as a child, and my mum was saying, don't say that, say yuck, you're British. When we in the UK see English, there are so many words in the English language that are like this. There are make and do, miss and lose, earn and win. So many words where we have 2 or 3 or 4 words for this, but in other languages there's just one word. But I'm going to clarify exactly when you should use miss, when you should use lose, and when you can use to be missing as well. So I'm going to start by going through all of the situations in which you should use miss, and then I'm going to give you some extra little collocations and miscellaneous phrases as well. And then I'll go through as to how that word is pronounced in English. In many languages across the world, the way a word is written tells you and shows you exactly how that word should be spoken. This is not the case in English, and it's part of the reason why English pronunciation and English speaking is so difficult for learners. I have found a really good method that has helped so many of my students. Take a book that you have already read in English, or a book that you would like to read in English. I have got a fair few recommendations. Finding out what that word is in English. Number 7, this tip is very helpful because I know a lot of you just want to learn one specific accent. Well, this tip is speak with a variety of native speakers who all have different accents. It's so tempting to just focus on one accent, but you will be doing yourself a disservice. The wider the variety of people that you speak with, the more flexible your brain will be when it comes to understanding. Anyone who's going to take an English exam like the IELTS or the FCE or even the CAE, anyone who needs to write emails frequently, even text messages if you want to use correct grammar throughout text messages, school essays, native speakers and non-native speakers, whether you already speak English or you're learning English, this video is for absolutely everybody. As always, I love learning about your languages and your grammar as well, so do comment down below and tell me if you use apostrophes in your language and if you use them in the same way that we do in English. If you are interested in grammar and she felt like the English equivalent for que asco. In Spanish, it wasn't strong enough, it wasn't good enough. She wanted better ways of expressing that she hated something, that she finds it repulsive. And it's true, I do find the Spanish phrase for how disgusting to be much more expressive. So today I'm going to talk you through everything. I'm going to talk you through the noise that we make when we find something disgusting in British culture and American culture, the word that we use to say that something's really awful. That matter. English is not a strictly phonetic language. The way a word is spelt or written in English might not give you any indication as to how that word is pronounced. That's why pronunciation in English is so hard for my students. But if you listen to a word, as you read it, your brain will start making connections. And the next time you see that word, you'll know exactly how it's pronounced, how it's supposed to sound. And the next time you hear that word, you'll know how it's spelt, how it's written. It's such an effective method. And the best part is you can get one.
Yeah, I teach English online. So I do that through YouTube or through my website and Facebook groups and that kind of thing. So I have lots of students online.
And how did you get into teaching? Because you originally did something different.
Yeah, I did. I've been teaching for about 5 years now.
Okay.
But before that, I was a landscape architect.
A landscape architect.
Correct. Yeah, okay. So it was a design degree that I did at university.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, of course, I wanted to.
The way a word is spelt in English doesn't necessarily give you much information as to how it's pronounced in English. If you listen to a word as you read it, your brain will start making connections. And the next time you see that word written down, you'll know exactly how to say it, how it's meant to sound, the pronunciation. And the next time you hear that word, you'll know exactly how it should be spelt. You're combining two skills, but developing all of your skills. It's such an effective method, and the best part is you can get one free audiobook. That's a thing when you speak English. You need to find a close-up video, a zoomed-in video of a native speaker or a speaker that you admire speaking in English. You then need to record yourself up close, preferably at the same distance, speaking the same sentence. Analyze the way your lips move in comparison to their lips. Analyze how far they stick their tongue out, or maybe they push it right back in their mouth. What are you doing with your tongue? This started you can use to sound like a native English speaker. This video is really going to help you improve your vocabulary. But if you want to improve your listening and pronunciation skills even further, then I highly recommend the special method of combining reading books with listening to the audiobook version on Audible. It sounds weird, reading and listening at the same time, but it's such an effective method. Let me explain. Take a book that you have already read in English, or a book that you would like to read in English. I've got lots of recommendations for books and audiobooks down below. So in Spanish it should be Joaquin, but speakers of English generally tend to pronounce it as Joaquin. Joaquin. So Joaquin Phoenix, for example. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't roll off the tongue. Number 2, now some of you are going to laugh at this one because you will know how to pronounce it, but I honestly, for the majority of my childhood, thought that this was pronounced as scene. Scene. So you know the actor Sean Bean? I thought he was Scene Bean. But yes, it should be pronounced Sean. The next one, now this just depends on the parents. Like, English isn't my first language, but I'm going to try my best here. Instead of apologising and being all small and seeming a bit unconfident, you're taking ownership. English isn't my first language, but I'm going to try my best. It's unapologetic. It's confident, and it makes you seem like you're totally in control and The audience is going to want to work with you. So this is an opportunity to participate here. In the comments below, I'd really like to know if you have heard any great alternatives to sorry for my English. Or you can say if you think sorry for my English. Tip number 6 is to try and think in English. I have made an entire video about this topic, but it's such a big topic. Some people find it very easy to think in English, and some people find it near impossible to think in English. If you want to be able to speak English fluently without even thinking, then you need to train yourself to think in English. A good way to start doing this is to have a little English narrator in your head. Choose someone's voice that you like. I know a lot of people use Emma Watson's voice. They have her. In some English-speaking countries, you would call a chili pepper. Sometimes, to clarify, we say chili pepper. 5. Cucumber. Cucumber. 6. Aubergine. Aubergine. 7. Artichoke. Artichoke. 8. Onion. Onion. Effectively, and use that to improve your English. So, think of the mundane tasks that you do every day. Obviously, commuting is a big thing, going on public transport. For me, something that takes a massive chunk out of my day is it's my hair and makeup. I have to be on camera. I like to look a certain way on camera. So I have to spend a little while doing my hair and doing my makeup. And I find it really boring. I enjoy hair and makeup, but every single day it feels like such a waste of time. The same goes for natural, fast English conversation. You may understand the majority of the words, but you may miss some key words that are essential to understanding the conversation. How can you understand a passage of text or a fast English conversation if you don't know the vocabulary? Yes, sometimes you can understand the context, and many exams will rely on this for the easier questions, but to get full marks, you need to have a broad and expansive vocabulary. On your screen, there will appear a gap fill exercise. I'm going to Number 17. In British English, we say to cram, which isn't strictly an idiom, but the American version is. In American English, they say to hit the books, to hit the books. And this means to study intensively over a short period of time, usually right before an exam. For example, I relied heavily on cramming throughout my university degree. I wouldn't recommend it, but I did get a first-class degree, so make of that what you will. Number 18. In British English, to get itchy feet, to get itchy feet. In American English, distracted by the beautiful sounds of English. To have a crack at something is to try something, or to try to do something, or to have a turn at doing something. So, for example, maybe there's a really hot, I always struggle with this, you know, like a jar of pasta sauce or gherkins. I love gherkins, pickles in America. Especially the ones from the Polish section in the supermarket. They are better than the English gherkins. Anyway, I digress. The jar, the lid is really so important, but also quite difficult in English. But it's so important for shy people because it means that if you need a break from speaking, you can pass the baton to the other person. Examples. So how did you get into your career path? Or if you could do one thing differently, what would you do? That opens up an opportunity for the other person to tell their story and to talk a bit, so you can have time for a rest. Most people enjoy talking about themselves, and they also appreciate good listeners. And you can be both of those by asking questions. The only thing you have to do is learn and remember how to ask them correctly. I always have a couple of questions
who are English, practice it 3 times like that if it's important. If English isn't your first language, I'd say you probably need to practice it 6 times for it to feel okay on the day.
Yeah, because when you have something practiced, it kind of just comes out more easily. So I really agree with that one. What about tip number 2?
Tip number 2 is that you've got to get the body relaxed and prepared. So it's what I call getting the butterflies.
You got me moving there. Okay.
Breathing and grounding. The butterflies have to fly in formation. So you know in English we say that you get butterflies in your stomach.
Yes.
Step further. Maybe you're watching programs with English subtitles. That's good, but you don't want to rely on the subtitles. I want you to learn with your ears and not with your eyes. So what I recommend you do to take your listening to the next level is watch each program or movie twice. It's probably more achievable with programs, short ones. I would recommend that you aim for something that's less than 30 minutes. So you could try a comedy like Friends, which is American English, or maybe BBC News and you can just watch the headlines.
You about 7 words that learners of English commonly use incorrectly. They commonly misuse these words. This video will help you find out if you are also making mistakes with these words, and I'll show you how to use them correctly, and I'll also show you what you were trying to say by misusing these words. Before we get started, I would just like to thank the sponsor of today's video. It is Skillshare. And if you haven't heard of them before, they're an online learning community with thousands of classes of all different topics. Watch yourself in the mirror whilst speaking English is a common tip that many teachers give. However, I think you should go one step further than this. You absolutely need to analyse what your lips, tongue, throat, face in general is doing when you speak English. You need to find a close-up video, a zoomed-in video of a native speaker or a speaker that you admire speaking in English. You then need to record yourself up close, preferably at the same distance. Accents. Spanish people speaking English. She is surrounded by mainly English people. She speaks with people who all speak the same accent and she really, really struggles. I, however, have been to many different countries